I saw someone online recently say somewhere there's a guy stranded on an island with no phone who doesn't know how angry and afraid he should be. And the reason this is hilarious is because we're all aware of how anger and fear are stoked by news and social media, but so many of us have trouble choosing an alternative. We know that our emotional state is being manipulated by others, but we don't really do anything about it. To be clear, there are lots of things in the world that legitimately cause anger or fear. It's not all just social media manipulation, but the algorithms and the news media play off these emotions and amp them up so that every negative story becomes the most important thing. We're currently in the season of Advent, and by the way, it's not too late to get my free Advent devotional. One common misconception about this season leading up to Christmas is that Advent is about pretending Jesus hasn't been born yet. But if you properly understand Advent, you'll see why Advent hope defeats fear. As I continue this fermentation series, loosely based on the book The Patient Ferment of the Early Church, we're making kimchi today to practice waiting in hope. Cut a head of Napa cabbage into quarters and soak in room temperature salted water for 1 hour. Don't worry if your cabbage starts falling apart at any point in this process. It'll all get stuffed into the jar when we're done. To a blender, add 1 cup of gochugaru, half a large onion chopped, 15 cloves of garlic, yes, 15, a 1/4 cup of peeled, roughly chopped ginger, 2 tablespoons each of salt and sugar, 1 tablespoon each of oyster sauce and soy sauce, a 1/4 cup of fish sauce, 2 tablespoons of rice vinegar, and a 1/2 cup of water. Blend until completely smooth. This kimchi recipe from Roy Choi is sort of a shortcut to good kimchi flavor, so it doesn't use some of the other ingredients like salted shrimp that you'll see in more traditional recipes. Transfer the paste to a bowl. Shake most of the water off your cabbage, then lay it out on a baking sheet and spread the paste all over the cabbage in between every layer, then follow up with some sliced chives in each layer. When you have good coverage, we're stuffing all of this into a jar, keeping the layers intact as best you can. If you need to chop it in half to fit, then cover the newly exposed areas with the spice paste. Press everything down into the jar as much as possible and top with extra paste. Then seal it up and let it sit at room temperature for 2 days, then in the refrigerator for at least 2 weeks. Awaiting the birth of Christ is a part of Advent. But if you look at the Advent liturgies and lectionary readings, you'll see that they prominently feature the second coming of Christ, when he'll come to judge the world in justice and righteousness. During Advent, we enter into Israel's hope for the coming Messiah. We long for the just judge to come and set things right. And the reason Advent begins the Christian year is to communicate an important piece of wisdom. But if you're not very familiar with liturgy or the Christian tradition, you might miss it. Advent begins the Christian year because if you know how everything ends, it changes how you see the rest of the story. If you're watching The Empire Strikes Back for the first time, and you've already seen the poster for Return of the Jedi, then you know that Luke Skywalker isn't in any real danger. We've seen the picture, he's in the next movie. And the Christian year begins with Advent for this same reason. Despite the twists and turns of life, the cliffhangers and the heartbreaks, and there certainly have been many in the last few years, we know how the story ends. Christ will return in glory, and all will be set right. We begin with the end so that everything else is put in perspective. We hope for and work towards the best outcomes in our nation, our local communities, our families, but we do so knowing that no matter what happens, Christ will come again and triumph over evil. Fermentation teaches us to wait in hope, knowing that the outcome is secure. When your kimchi is ready, try making a kimchi fried rice. Or click here to see one of my favorite things I've made on this channel, my Korean fried chicken sandwich. If you like spicy food, you've got to give it a try.